So we got a special Halloween podcast here for you. I am joined by Alejandro Dominguez, who is the Dead Explorer. He is a paranormal investigator, filmmaker, and explorer in search of answers to the unexplained. You can check out his quest to document real-life ghosts, strange activities, and haunted places on his YouTube channel or his website. You can find him at youtube.com/Alejandro in Austin, deadexplorer.com, twitter.com/tweet Alejandro, or facebook.com/Dead Explorer. And I will, of course, have all of those links in the video description, so check it out if you want to visit any of his pages. What's up, Dead Explorer? How are you doing?
Hey, what's up, UC? How you doing, man?
Not too bad. I just gave a little introduction, but why don't I let you tell the people who you are and what you do?
My name is Alejandro Dominguez. I'm a paranormal investigator. I'm also a filmmaker, and the two passions came together one day when I decided to create a YouTube channel like 5 years ago, and ever since I've been traveling all over the United States looking to capture real paranormal activity on video. I started basically investigating because when I was 6 years old, I had an experience in my grandparents' apartment in Mexico City, where I'm from, where I thought I saw what I believe to be an apparition, and pretty much that's kind of just the thing that kind of got, the floodgates opened. I was living in Mexico City. That's where I'm from. I grew up in Mexico. I lived in my grandparents lived in a really simple apartment building, and I was at their house, and I was actually in the bathroom and looking out a window when I thought I saw a woman's face, kind of white, clear face, maybe kind of like it had a veil or some kind of headdress to it. And of course, I thought it was scary enough to run out of the bathroom and tell everybody. I see people from skeptics to real believers. I let people kind of do their own thing, and I'm somewhere in the middle. But a lot of people that I've met, they've had a similar experience. When they were a kid, something happened to them, and that's kind of why they got into it. And it seems to be a pretty frequent story. And, one theory is that when we're younger, before we're kind of influenced by society and what's normal and what's not normal and what's real and what's not real, and, we're more open-minded. Everything is possible when you're a younger child, and there's a belief that younger kids are able to see things that we as adults have forgotten to see or grown accustomed to see, or just told ourselves can't be true. I think we both kind of know that we're both kind of skeptical, and we try to debunk or try to disprove things because we think most times things aren't paranormal. But at the same time, I know, speaking for myself, I try to stay open-minded, and if something really does seem legit, then it's kind of hard to argue with that. And so, probably I think most cases I go on, I hate to say it, but a lot of times nothing happens. And I'm okay with that because, I think that's actually the way it should be. And actually one of my most viral videos, probably the second most viewed one, nothing happened. And at the end of the video, we say, though nothing happened in this investigation, the staff still believes, but I think people just liked watching the investigation itself, that was enjoyment, that they didn't need to see, us pretending that a ghost was there, or any gimmicks, or trying to overact for what's not there. But with that being said, there has been times, law of averages, I've been to enough haunted places. I have over 100 ghost hunting videos on YouTube. There's been times where I have been places and I'm like, wow, I think this place is really haunted. There's just too many weird things that myself and other people have witnessed or we've caught. And I've been to a lot of haunted places, but I've seen lights, and I'm talking about with my naked eye, not with a camera, not with flash photography, but lights where it will appear and disappear just as quickly as you'll see them. And that's actually the most common thing that I've seen visually compared to what people would expect, which is, basically a transparent or maybe a visible spirit that looks like a human being. So lights is actually more common. Sometimes so many things happen in one place that the coincidences of them lining up the way they did seems like such a long shot that although scientifically it's not 100% concrete proof, it is just common sense tells you that it might be something unexplained, maybe even paranormal or ghost. I'm not going to put down anybody who doesn't agree with me. In fact, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll respond to the skeptics. If I think they're coming from a legitimate place and not just trolling, I let them know that, hey, that's fine. The skeptics are actually the ones who are going to be the ones we need to prove the existence of the paranormal to, because believers already believe. So there's not much to do about that. It's actually the people who are skeptical that are going to be the ones that are going to need to see this evidence, I guess, one day that would answer the questions for everybody. Obviously, TV shows, which is where a lot of people see ghost hunting if they're not going out and doing it themselves. TV shows are different than real life because their goal is not necessarily to, scientifically prove that ghosts exist. Although maybe some of the people who do those shows have those intentions. In fact, I have friends who are on the shows, and the difference between their own personal outtake and the way those shows get edited are two completely different things. But in fairness to them, if I was in their shoes, would I be interested in having the resources to travel to different haunted places? I mean, I'm self-financed. I do that now, but it's kind of one of those things. Just like it doesn't seem like that bad of a deal, so I can't blame people who aren't on the shows. But at the end of the day, the people who edit the shows and the people who produce the shows and people who decide how the shows are going to look, they're going about it for a different reason. They're not going about it because of the ghost hunting or the research. They're going about it because of ratings. And so I think we all know that those things are made for entertainment. Believe it or not, I do believe there's people who are more of a magnet than others, that seem to are more in tune with the stuff around us. Somehow they see it a little bit better, sometimes they hear it a little bit better, and sometimes it seems to find them, which is really the other side of the coin than the people who have a lot of experiences and they believe they see something all the time. Sometimes it's just their imagination. So I've gone with people that everything's a ghost, even though you can be sitting there, right next to them, and have a totally logical explanation for what they're seeing. They're not looking for the logical explanation. They're looking for the ghost. They're looking for that to be the explanation to everything.
Absolutely. I mean, there's totally different types of people who choose to be ghost hunters. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of situation. There's obviously people who got into it to try to debunk things like yourself, that some of the best ghost hunters are skeptics themselves, and they're usually the last person to accept their own evidence. There's other people, like you said, that believe every single thing is a ghost, regardless of fact. That's just what they want to believe. But I think that's why you're one of the better explorers out there, and why you're definitely somebody who people should check out, because if you present evidence, it means that you have taken the time to try to debunk it yourself, and basically you hit every wall that you encounter and still can't come up with any answer. So you say, wow, this is pretty compelling, and that's why you choose to share it. So as far as evidence that you've chosen to share and evidence that you've gathered, what would you say is probably the most interesting evidence that you've gotten and the most interesting place that you have visited?
There's a county jail from 1885. It's really small. It's only 3 stories tall. But every time I go there, really strange things happen. In fact, an investigator that I was with seemed to have gotten choked. And that was a really interesting video because, it looks like something's happening to him. And, that's a total separate story, kind of going back to our conversation earlier about what's real, what's not real. But it was scary because, it was definitely, at face value, at least a medical emergency. Jay's attack is definitely a personal experience for Jay. Only Jay knows what happened. The forensics professor had an opinion, not to give away a lot in case people want to check out Haunted Lockdown, but to say the least, it really kind of surprised me. And there's stuff that's happened there that's really strange, but some of the best pieces of evidence I've captured There's a couple pieces that come to mind, and one of them actually is some footage that, because I think so many people are skeptical, really hasn't gotten the, I guess, respect or the attention or whatever I hoped they would get. But out in Anson, Texas, really in the middle of nowhere. It's closer to Abilene, if anybody knows the geography of Texas. And it's one of those one stoplight towns. I mean, it really, really is. And there is dirt roads out there that are, FM roads, farm to market roads. And there is one of those dirt roads that if you follow down to kind of like the crossroads of two dirt roads and turn around, do the whole blinker headlights type thing, these lights will appear. And I've tried those kind of different things in a lot of different places, because the whole lights appear, you blink your headlights. It's kind of like an urban legend that every big city or every state has a variation of. But this is the only time that what people say happened actually happened, and it was one of those things that is very hard to debunk. These lights showed up. They were very bright. They were orbiting, pulsating. They blended together. They separated into individual little lights. They re-blended together and they faded away. And some of the light faded away into darkness, and the other part of the light seemed to just quickly, so fading just quickly vanished. And I caught that all on video. And I mean, there is no oncoming traffic on a dirt road in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere. A lot of people said it's headlights of the car headed towards you, which I can personally attest was not headlights of any vehicle driving towards me. In fact, I did a video about a year later, and I'll put it up as more as a vlog of me being on that road in the daylight to show how it wouldn't have been another car. I mean, it's a super narrow dirt road. That was amazing. And the thing is, that video didn't do nothing. I put that video up. I was really proud of it. I was so excited to share it with people. I'm like, this is amazing. This is going to blow people's minds. And sometimes you root for some videos. You really do. You're like, you have this personal attachment to either what happened there or to the video. And you're really proud of it. And it goes up and nobody sees it.
Well, it's part of the reason why I wanted to get you on this podcast, because there's definitely a few videos that you have now and definitely more on the way that I really want people to see. And that is the ones where you use a 360 camera. So you said that you got a 4K 360 camera, which is essentially a camera that can shoot in any direction, all directions, and allows the viewer to click and drag and view whatever part of the area that you filmed in themselves. So you can watch the video over and over and keep looking at a different area each time. If you have a VR headset and you're wearing the headset, instead of clicking and dragging, you actually can look around the environment yourself as if you were actually there. So tell me more about that.
I've looked around, and as far as I can tell, there's not really anybody else using this camera. Maybe it's just so new, and so many people haven't really had experience with it. But basically, 360-degree video is how we capture video by having a very special camera equipment that shoots at all directions at the same time. And so when it gets played back, all directions are played back at the same time. It's just a matter of which direction you want to look, and you can control it and rewatch the video and look at a different direction. It's like if you have a VR headset, you can actually turn your head wearing it, virtual reality headset, and you feel like you're in the room. So I mean, I think it's an amazing technology. And that's the great thing about 360-degree video. It records everything. So now everything's being captured, and so no longer can somebody say the camera wasn't pointed at the right place at the right time. Now everything can be captured as long as the lighting's good and all that. And then not only that, I think it eliminates the people's ability to fake stuff, because if they are faking stuff off camera, they can no longer do that. So I really think it's going to increase the chances that somebody's going to capture something substantial. Actually, when it comes to evidence, audio evidence is actually the most common evidence that most investigators will say they capture. It's just a little easier to capture it. Again, compared to video, without the 360 cameras, video is all a matter of where you're pointing the camera at any particular moment, while audio you can record it from any direction. And so audio evidence is definitely the most common evidence that I've captured. And sometimes multiple devices will capture the same audio evidence, which makes that bit of evidence that much stronger when you can have captured something with multiple devices. There are some EVPs I'm really proud of. Some are Class A EVPs. The best one was a voice of a little girl that I caught on the USS Hornet in Alameda, California. It's a clear sentence from a little girl, very loud, very clear. I don't even have to do any audio enhancements or manipulate the audio to make it sound like a sentence or to make it sound like a little girl. It is what it is. And in both cases, there were intelligent responses. So the first time I caught that, I was in a place called La Borde House, and this is another one of my favorite places. It's in Rio Grande City. It's on the border of Texas and Mexico, a very small town, kind of a rougher town, to be very honest with you. But in a Victorian house, that back in the day, that town was a place that people would go through on stagecoach. And the legend is in this house, a girl drowned in a well. And she supposedly lives in the red room of the house. It's a room that's all red floor, red paint, red drapes, red sheet covers, red everything. Victorian house. You got to think of something like from the 1800s, all red. And we were in there, and we did a quick EVP session. So it's called a burst EVP session, where we kind of want to just keep it really short so we can play back the audio right there on the spot, in case something responded. And that way we will know rather quickly if something did, and then we can, follow up on that instead of just finding out way later that something was trying to talk to us. And in that room, we caught an EVP of a little girl who's cried out "mama," but very clear, kind of like the voice on the Hornet, Class A EVP, clear as day, a little girl crying for her mama, saying "mama." And we were shocked. In fact, we kind of, instead of focusing on, oh, the little girl said "mama," let's see what we can get her to do now, we wanted to rush down the stairs, being on the second floor, and share with people that were on the first floor, like, wow, you gotta listen to this. And we go down the stairs, make it to the bottom of the stairs, and we're still recording with different devices, and the same little girl's voice that said "mama," same tone, same voice, there's no confusing it. This time out loud said, "stay down." When we had just reached the bottom of the stairs. And we were able to capture the "stay down" with audio devices. So the EVP we didn't hear it in real time, but we captured it, and then it was followed up with a clear voice out loud from a girl sounding like she was on top of the stairs, that the minute we got to the bottom of the stairs told us to stay down. And in the footage, you hear our reaction, like, what did you just hear? Did somebody just say "stay down"? That's what it sounded like. Let's play it back. Multiple devices recorded, because it was a voice, loud as day. So if there was an audio device recording it, it was going to capture it. And so that's a lot of coincidences, for, maybe somebody could say the "mama" something was wrong with the recorder. Maybe we captured a noise outside that we weren't aware of in real time. But then for the same voice to show up again, to be captured again, and this time seem to be intelligent about us reaching the bottom of the stairs, the odds of that being coincidences, it just seems like it's a stretch to say, oh, it's just a series of coincidences that just lined up at the exact same time.
So speaking of coincidences lining up at the exact same time, tell me more about how EMF signals correlate to paranormal evidence, where somebody sees something, hears something, and then they say, oh, and there was an EVP reading at the same time. Tell me why that's kind of significant to your evidence.
So for those who aren't familiar, what EMF stands for, it's electronic magnetic field. And so there are meters that are available to measure the amount of milligauss that is in any given area. And, electricians will use EMF meters for the purposes of their trade. But, there is a theory that about paranormal investigators that If there's a spirit, there's a ghost, there will be a spike in the electronic magnetic field. Typically, you get spikes from electronic sources. So if you take an EMF meter and take it to like an outlet with a missing cover plate, and that happens in a lot of older buildings, or some of these places you go to, there's you're either old, they're only there as a museum, or so people can investigate them, and stuff is not up to code. And so you can put your meter on these devices, and kind of, there's a couple different. A mel meter will give you a number. A K2 meter will light up a series of lights from 1 light to 5, with 5 being the most electronic magnetic field, and see those spikes. So in theory, those should be the only sources of those spikes. So if you're in an area where you get those kind of spikes, but there's not that electrical item to generate it, then what's causing it? And so even to the point where when you're investigating, you want to make sure it's not your own equipment, your own camera, your own recorders, that it's not your cell phone, because cell phones will give a lot of false readings on those devices. So you want to put your cell phone on airplane mode, or turn them off completely. And so you try to just kind of use it when the time calls for it. Sometimes it is said, and I have personal experience with this, that electronic magnetic fields, high fields of milligauss, will make people uneasy, and will make them feel maybe a little vertigo, maybe make their stomachs tie up in a little knot. And sometimes for some people, when they're in that spooky part of their building that gives them the heebie-jeebies, those feelings make them think it's paranormal, when sometimes it's the high EMF. Maybe things aren't wired well, or there's some kind of, this is why electricians use these devices, to try to make sure things are within code. And people will mistake that, and that's actually kind of getting a lay of the land with one of these meters, is actually a way to kind of maybe figure out if there's a logical explanation for what feelings of uneasiness that people have.
I'm glad you brought that up, because this doesn't exactly relate to video or audio evidence, but as far as personal experience goes, I have read a lot of stories of people who thought that their house was haunted. So they kept hearing things, they kept seeing things, brought people in to check it out and investigate. And as it turned out, there was wire that was exposed and was creating a high EMF area of the house, and that was actually causing those situations to happen. So it's very interesting that you could actually use an EMF detector to debunk that, not necessarily to prove that there was something in fact happening. And that's also one of the really interesting things too, is that the age that we live in of paranormal investigation, that up until maybe 40 years ago, not even, maybe 30 years ago, having these devices was unheard of. That up until recently, every ghost story was just word of mouth. It was, oh, well, my grandfather said this, or this person said this. It was all passed down as a story that you heard. Now that camcorders, audio devices, things like that are a common possession for people, that everyone has a camera, everyone can obviously easily record things, we now live in the age of documentation. This is the first time that this has ever happened. So we really are in an interesting point where everyone is getting all this evidence, and it's never been like that before. But at the same time, the way that technology is advancing so quickly, maybe in 5 to 10 years, people are going to look back on what we were using and think, oh my God, like, why, that's what you were using? Or if you're still using it, why are you still using that? That's like walking around with a Walkman, a cassette player. You're like, why don't you have an MP3 player? Well, you're living in the Stone Age. So, and that's one of the other things that I think is great about using a 360 camera, that this is definitely the type of equipment that people like you need to be using, because we are almost at the point where we are going to have a device, EMF video camera. So it'd almost be like, as an easy example of audio, if I'm speaking, you're going to see radiating lines coming out of my mouth and bouncing off of the walls, seeing it reverberating, seeing where the sound goes. So an EMF video camera would essentially be a visual representation of the EM field. So you can actually see what it looks like, where it is moving, and how it's moving in a visual format, which is totally new, but would be an incredible piece to complement any kind of regular video evidence that you get. Because one of the other things that I've read too is, which is very interesting with the EM field, is the feeling that someone is looking at you, or the feeling of you can actually sense when someone's looking at you, or you feel like you're being watched, actually isn't totally crazy. That there is scientific evidence now leaning towards validating that claim, saying that the EM fields actually can connect in people. So if you stare at somebody long enough and your energy actually connects with them, that there is a fair amount of evidence showing that your EM field has extended and connected to theirs, and showing that yes, you are having an electric attachment to them, and that's why they are sensing your presence. So the fact that that is actually now being questioned and very close to being validated, having an EM camera would also absolutely prove that they could do a demonstration and show, here's a person standing here, here's this person staring at them, and you will actually see the radiating lines moving outward and connecting to that person's field. So combining all of these factors is going to be tremendous for creating a more well-rounded documentation for presenting evidence of paranormal investigation. So again, that's one of the reasons why I think everyone should check out Dead Explorer, because he is one of the trailblazers in the field of paranormal investigation. One of the few people I know who is starting to use some of this new groundbreaking technology. So again, check him out, youtube.com/Alejandro in Austin, or deadexplorer.com. Reach out to him on Twitter @tweetalejandro, or check him out on Facebook, facebook.com/deadexplorer. I want to thank him again for taking the time to sit down and talk to me about all this stuff. I think we covered a lot of great topics. There is definitely a huge gap between the skeptics and the believers, and I feel that he is the perfect person right in the middle who's helping to bridge that gap. As everybody who has seen my debunking ghost hunting equipment video, you know that I lean more towards the skeptic side, but it absolutely does not mean that I do not believe. It just means that I'm maybe harder to convince. But that's all the more reason to check out Dead Explorer and keep the conversation going on his channel. There's plenty more to talk about, and there's plenty of videos of his to see, and I'm excited to see what else he has to come out in the future. Thanks again for joining us, Alejandro.
Oh, awesome, brother! Thank you so much, and especially for the great compliments. It means a lot. I appreciate it, and thanks for having me on.